Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Indie Alaska is an innovative weekly web series capturing the diverse and colorful lifestyle of Alaskans. Real stories of everyday Alaskans at work and play. Supported in part by Alyeska Pipeline Service Company.
The National Weather Service.
Good Thursday, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with you on this 12th of February. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information for your community and village by listening to Marine VHF, NOAA Weather Radio, or finding us online at weather.gov/Alaska. You can also call the Weather Info line, 800-472-0391. If you haven't called that in a while, make sure you've got a pencil and piece of paper. Write down the numbers you use, and then next time you don't have to listen to the announcements about what you're going to listen to. Just punch the numbers in. As you head to Facebook, you're able to access weather information during the day and in between the Alaska Weather Show on NWS Alaska. On Twitter, all the forecast offices in Alaska are on Twitter. NWS Juneau, NWS Fairbanks, and NWS Anchorage, as well as NWS Alaska, the regional account. And if you want to tell us about your weather, show us pictures about your weather, use the hashtag AKwx. Make sure you tell us where you are, but that clues us into the conversation that you want to talk about weather and share that with all of the Alaska community. So that's a great way to interact with us on Twitter and on Facebook. On YouTube, of course, in the afternoon, you get your daily afternoon map briefing from the NWS Anchorage and NWS Fairbanks accounts. That's around 4 o'clock or so, and updates every day, 7 days a week, even on holidays. And then, of course, you'll get the show here. After this show, you'll get the complete show on Alaska Public's YouTube account, AKwx TV. So you can search for that on YouTube there if you miss a bit or piece. Let's look up north. Guess what these are? Wind chill advisories. It's still cold across the Arctic there, and winter is still upon you. With that, we have wind chill values for the next 24 hours, at least into actually Friday or Saturday, I should say, 6 a.m. Saturday. That could be as cold as 55 below. That includes Wainwright. That includes areas down toward Point Hope. That includes Kaktovik and many areas along the eastern Beaufort Seacoast. So with the wind moving and the cold that is already there, those wind chill values, again, could be dangerous at times. Make sure you're using precautions if you have to step outside, even for a brief moment. So that type of wind chill may last until at least Saturday morning, according to our friends at the Fairbanks National Weather Service office. Not to be forgotten with the wintry fun would be the Pribilofs with westerly winds, or northerly winds I should say, 30 to 40 miles per hour and gusts to 55. Now, the good thing is it looks like conditions will start to settle down, but after this evening. So sometime after about midnight or so, the winds will start to diminish, and that means the visibility might come up a little bit, but still some nasty wind chills with that, as well as about 1 more inch of snow on top of what you've already seen today. So a little more snow, still a little bit of wind, gusts up to 55 through the rest of tonight. And then once we get into early morning hours there tomorrow, we'll start to see those winds diminish, still from the north, about 20 to 35 miles per hour, and gusts down to about 45. So conditions should improve as we head into tomorrow, but tonight still kind of a nasty, no good night out there with visibility under about a half mile around St. Paul and St. George. So a winter weather advisory there for snow and blowing snow. Out across the west, well, we can see what's going on with the Pribilofs. They're right about there. Northeasterlies coming off the continent, and they are blowing. And those northeasterly winds are strong at times and contain a little bit of snow as that's working its way down toward the Aleutians. The continued muck and the mire of that northeasterly flow across the cold ice and the cold snow and across the cold waters, bringing the low stratus to your region. Occasional snow showers passing through. Some places like Unalaska and Dutch Harbor a little bit closer to that deeper moisture and getting a little bit more of that streaming your way over and over and over again. Out across the west, there is signs of warmth working northward, but that's across the west. And here's that cold air that is going to keep that pushed back to the west. So out of reach now for the Bering Sea. And with that, the ice edge continues to slowly drift southward. We'll have an update on that for the Pribilofs here in just a few minutes, as well as a look at the ice edge for all of the Bering Sea. Across the Gulf of Alaska, you can see another wave of moisture is working through south central today. That brought a little bit of, let's see, all the things that we saw today. Rain and freezing rain and sleet and snow, all of it. maybe winter just couldn't make up its mind coming through the Anchorage area. So if you are passing through town today or trying to fly in or out of town and caught a piece of that, I'm sorry. That was kind of a little bit of a mess, and now the drivers are driving home through it. As you're looking further northward, though, the clouds continue moving your way and heading up toward Fairbanks. This will start to cross over the Alaska Range tonight, drying out as it goes, but maybe not entirely. There could be some snow showers in the interior over the next couple days. And behind that, another wave of low pressure working up the eastern Gulf Coast. You can kind of see the spin here across the eastern Gulf. As this works northward, it is bringing warmer and wetter air your way, so another round of rainfall working through. Behind that, another surge as a pretty pronounced a ridge of high pressure across the all of the state and the west coast is working northward. That's going to lead to warmer weather and more pronounced rain and warm events coming across the central and eastern Gulf. So probably right now what you see is what you're going to get for at least the next couple days in southeastern Alaska. Meanwhile, cold continues to fall out into the Bering Sea, so the pattern continues there. Here's a look at the weather map for today. Low pressure across the central and eastern Gulf attached to an occlusion there across the east at 998 millibars. It's not a terribly strong storm, but it's just another surge of warmth working northward. A frontal boundary sitting across just north of Prince William Sound and across the Susitna and Matanuska valleys there and stretching into British Columbia and the extreme southern parts of the Yukon. Up north, a few areas of light snow around Ambler today and around the Yukon Valley. To the south and west, we see a little bit more snow across the extreme western tip of the YK Delta and the Pribilofs, of course, some periods of moderate to occasionally heavy snow and blowing snow on top of that with poor visibility. High pressure across eastern Siberia at 1,025 millibars, keeping that cold working its way off of the continent, and areas of fog across the Arctic coast and also some of those dangerous wind chills that we saw today. Tonight's forecast shows troughs of low pressure, just waves working from east to west across the north and the west coast. This is focusing that precipitation builder right there across the Pribilofs and across the central and eastern Aleutians. Better chance for some rain showers south and west of Bristol Bay. Still some ice there, of course, and areas of snow showers across the region around the YK northward into the Norton Sound region. We'll have some snow showers across the western Alaska Range just north of Prince William Sound. Most of what you see in the Sound is probably going to be rainfall. And decreasing clouds for a large part of the western Kenai Peninsula, the Matanuska and the Anchorage Bowl region, and for areas around Kodiak Island. To the east, though, not the case. Clouds building in, a better chance for rainfall there. A little bit of snow across the Skagway and Haines region, of course, and across British Columbia and into southern Yukon. So we get into Friday, that wave is slowly working its way northward once again, pushing more rain into parts of Prince William Sound and back into Kodiak Island. Drier weather for the Cook Inlet region and the western sections of the Alaska Range, maybe even north into the Susitna Valley. There will still be some pockets of snow showers there around the Alaska Range, but points north look a little bit cloudier than we've seen in a couple days. Chance of snow showers there across the Brooks Range and westward toward Nome, Nunivak Island. The Pribilofs still looking at blowing snow, and parts of the central and western Aleutians still looking at least some light snow opportunities and fog, with areas of rain and snow across the Alaska Peninsula. And then once you get out toward Unalaska and Dutch Harbor, you're going to be right there on that line between rain and snow throughout the day. Southeast, still looking at rain and that kind of onshore flow there. What about Saturday? More of the same for southeast. Low pressure's backing up once again into the southern tip of the Kenai Peninsula. That may cause some turbulence issues across the areas just outside of Prince William Sound. Snow showers for the Copper River Basin, the Susitna Valley and points west, and Prince William Sound and areas around the Anchorage Bowl may still see kind of that slop there. Occasional snow and rain showers possible as temperatures are warming up and more of that southerly flow working up out of the Gulf. Across the Brooks Range, snow showers there with high pressure across the Arctic coast itself and scattered areas of snow across parts of the Bering Sea, over and off of the ice edge and around the Pribilofs. A little bit further south across the central and eastern chain and the Alaska Peninsula, you're looking at rain and snow showers for Saturday. So kind of a warmer, milder forecast there heading into the weekend, and you can see that reflected easily around what's going on in the Gulf and the Aleutians. Areas northward still dealing with the cold temperatures and the appropriate winter weather, at least in my view. 30s and 40s for southeastern Alaska today, 52 in Sitka. Are you kidding? That's a warm day. 50 around Ketchikan and Annette, 51 around parts of Haida Gwaii, 35 up around Skagway today. Juneau was in the upper 30s. 30s and 40s for Prince William Sound. Cordova was at 44, and temperatures were trying to tap the 40-degree mark at 3 o'clock this afternoon. For Homer and Seward, 31 in Kenai, 29 in Anchorage. It was a little bit warmer than that by late day. 1 below around Tok, and 13 above for Eagle there. Northway is also seeing slightly milder weather. Fairbanks saw 7 with Healy at 4, Fort Greely at 11 degrees, Tanana was 17 earlier today. Fort Yukon 2 below, looked like Arctic Village was at 8 below AKwx Pass, 11 below the Arctic coast, showing temperatures from 30 to about 35 below in some of the colder readings we saw today. 21 below around Barrow, 27 below in Kaktovik. Kivalina was 11 below. Kotzebue 7 below. Shishmaref still not plotting, unfortunately, so our condolences there to your weather station at the moment. And 9 above for Nome with Unalakleet at 12. Galena was up to a balmy 12 as well, so it's kind of a warmer outlook for you. 13 above for McGrath, and Bethel showing 18 late this afternoon. And then a big difference once you get into the Bristol Bay region. 30s and 40s there with King Salmon at 42. Lake Iliamna saw temperatures in the upper 30s today. Kodiak Island, lower 40s. Same goes for many areas heading down towards Sand Point at 43. Port Hayden and Pilot Point saw readings in the 30s and 40s today, as well as Cold Bay and False Pass. St. Paul was 19, St. George at 21, and low 30s for the central and western chain. Now, temperatures overnight will stay fairly mild south of the Kuskokwim and into south central, teens, 20s, and even a few 30s there, 37 in Kodiak, 30s in quite a few areas in the mid to upper 40s, in fact, for overnight lows in southeast, and lower to mid 30s for many in the chain in the Alaska Peninsula, with the Arctic coast still looking at temps anywhere from 25 to about 35 below. In the interior tomorrow, look for highs in the lower to mid teens. Most of the Arctic coast still well below zero there at 15 to 30 below. Nome's looking at 17 above, southwest in the 20s and 30s, south central. Many places will go above freezing tomorrow, and again southeast in the mid to upper 40s, many closing in on 50 the further south you go. Flying weather shows quite a bit of IFR for southeast tomorrow, especially around Chilkoot and White Pass, some pockets of IFR in the Gulf, and we'll see diminishing areas of MVFR across some of the Talkeetnas and the eastern Alaska range going through the afternoon. You'll still see some patchy IFR, or MVFR I should say, south of Fairbanks there in the Yukon Valley. And once you get out across the Bering Strait, IFR conditions for St. Lawrence Island and many areas just to the western tip of the Seward Peninsula and Tin City. And IFR stretching off the YK all the way into the central parts of the Aleutians, including the Pribilof Islands there, so a little tricky getting in and out. AKwx Pass and Adigan Pass, we expect to see MVFR conditions throughout your Friday. As we go through Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, things are looking pretty good there and dry on the other side as well. Rainy Pass, VFR conditions there. Transitioning toward VFR flying for Windy Pass and for Isabel Pass on your Friday. Mentasta Pass looks all clear by the end of the day. VFR conditions there. And Tanita Pass, we expect to see VFR flying by the afternoon. Portage Pass, we may still have some rain and snow showers in the region, so by the afternoon, especially in the pass, watch for MVFR conditions there. Outside areas may be a little bit more improved quickly. Chilkoot and White Pass at this point looking like IFR flying for most of the day there. The warm weather is pushing its way into the northern Gulf. You can see that thin ribbon of warmth stretching out toward the southern tip of the Kenai Peninsula, already covering up a large chunk of southeast. The surface freezing line is not budging though, so we start to get some of that overrunning there, and that presents some other problems, perhaps some freezing rain or wintry mixed type weather. Icing potential is going to be hovering around the northern and western sections of the Gulf, a little bit further south though, the Alaska Peninsula. Most of this seems to be above 5,000 feet. Below 4,000 feet for the central parts of the Brooks Range, and below 5,000 feet also from St. Lawrence Island southward towards St. Matthew and the central Aleutians there, a little bit higher opportunity for occasional moderate, generally west of the Pribilofs. The jet stream has our pronounced trough of low pressure that has not moved in weeks, it seems like. You have a little bit more of a return of the cold air that's building northward because the ridge across the western coast is pushing northward, so it's pushing that stronger, faster flow up and away from Alaska. The result is that more of that warmer air is working up out of the Gulf of Alaska, but we still have a trough that's persistent out across the Bering Sea, pushing that active and cold weather in from the north and from the west. So for right now, the ridge is winning from the west coast of the United States. That's what's bringing the warmth. So we start to see more of the southerly flow, 40 to 50 knots across southeast. Winds very light across the interior at 9,000 feet, only about 5 to 10 knots. A westerly flow moving across the Brooks Range. A low pressure here across the central and eastern sections of the Aleutians. A southeasterly flow, 20 to 25 knots over the Pribilofs. That's a little bit more east and northeasterly at 3,000 feet. Winds are still light across the interior, coming across the Brooks Range from the northeast at around 20 to 25 knots. And winds across southeast coming in from the south and southwest, 40 to about 45 knots. For south central, winds remain fairly light, just diminishing rapidly coming off the ocean, about 20 to as low as 5 knots or so once you get into the Susitna Valley. So here's a look at turbulence potential then. You'll notice the greatest areas across the Gulf and southeastern Alaska, probably around 6,000 feet and below. We're going to watch that area around Montague Island and outside of the Copper River Basin all the way down to the eastern side of the Kenai Peninsula. With the circulation here, we might see those winds ramp up a little bit more, so low-level wind shear in the usual spots there across the northern Gulf. Across the YK Delta from Nunivak Island southward toward Adak and Atka below 4,000 feet, you should expect at least a little bit of chop. Across the Chukchi Seacoast and north of the Bering, and also across the coastal plain up toward the Arctic coast itself generally. Some light chop is expected there below 4,000 feet. All in all, though, most of the interior seems to be pretty smooth, and you should have improved visibility as you go into Friday. That's a look at your aviation forecast. I'll be back in just a few minutes with an update on the sea ice edge and the Pribilofs, and of course the rest of your marine weather. Stay tuned.
Brightest of the bright. Hey there, stargazers. I'm Dean Regas, astronomer for the Cincinnati Observatory.
And I'm James Albury, director of the Kika Silva Pla Planetarium in Gainesville, Florida. We're here to help you find your way around the sky tonight. With so many planets, stars, and constellations, where do you begin?
Our tip, start with the really bright stuff first. We've picked the 5 brightest nighttime objects this winter.
Visible even from urban locations, these 5 celestial wonders are sure to capture your imagination and jumpstart your relationship with the universe.
Let's show you.
Of course, we have to begin with the moon, the #1 brightest nighttime object. How can you not be awed by the sight of a full moon rising above the eastern horizon, or a thin, delicate crescent cradling the darkened orb after sunset?
This week, the moon is visible just before sunrise. It'll be in its waning phases and will soon move towards new moon on February 18th, when it will be almost directly in front of the sun.
But next week on February 19th, you might, just might, see the slimmest of waxing crescents right after sunset, low in the west. And each night after that, the moon will appear fuller and farther from the sun. Here it is on February 20th, the 21st, and the 22nd.
Wait a second, hold up. Go back 2 days.
To the 20th?
There. What's that bright thing just to the left of the moon?
Is it a bird?
Is it a plane?
Is it a UFO?
No, that's the 2nd brightest nighttime object.
Let's zoom in on the dazzling planet, Venus. Venus is the brightest star-like object in the night sky and can now be seen in the evening skies low in the west.
Venus is so incredibly bright because the planet is perpetually covered in clouds, and these clouds reflect sunlight much better than any other planet. Venus is over 100 million miles away right now, but will be getting closer each day, and will be blazing away in the evening skies for most of the year.
The other star-like object next to the moon and Venus is the red planet Mars. Mars can be among the top 5 brightest objects in the sky, but right now it's very far from Earth and pretty dim.
But don't miss this awesome conjunction on the 20th, the moon, Venus, and Mars.
Now we're facing east at 8 p.m. High up in the sky, you'll find the 3rd brightest nighttime object, the giant planet Jupiter. You've probably seen the king of the planets all month.
There is no mistaking Jupiter's steady cream-colored glow. With even a small telescope, Jupiter reveals a hidden system of 4 moons: Io, Europa, Ganymede, and Callisto. The cloud bands and the Great Red Spot can also be seen with a larger scope. Next up, let's look to the southeast for Sirius, aka the Dog Star. Sirius is seriously bright, making it the 4th brightest nighttime object. The name Sirius comes from a Greek word meaning searing or scorching, and it lives up to its name since it's twice as bright as any other star in the sky.
Sirius appears so bright because it's so close, relatively speaking. At only 8.5 light years away, the Dog Star is one of the closest stars to us. Look for Sirius rising in the southeast after dark. The star marks the nose of the constellation Canis Major, the big dog. Number 5 on our list is a yellow star called Capella.
Ah, Capella!
Capella can be found almost directly overhead in the evenings. It's the primary star in the constellation Auriga the Charioteer. Auriga looks more like a flattened pentagon than a man riding a chariot near the zenith.
When you observe Capella, you are really looking at a complex system of at least 4 stars orbiting each other in 2 binary pairs. Imagine having 4 suns in our sky.
There you have it, the top 5 brightest nighttime objects.
Get out there and find the moon, Venus, Jupiter, Sirius, and Capella tonight. The moon will be right next to Venus and Mars on the 20th.
And you can find Jupiter high in the eastern sky every night.
And then look for sparkling Sirius in the southeast and lie back in the grass or snow to see yellow-white Capella high overhead. It's all there when you keep looking up.
Here's a look at today's sea ice edge now. You'll notice it has advanced a little bit more to the south and southeast, east of St. Paul and St. George. It's still locked into Bristol Bay and areas along the Bering Sea coast for the Alaska Peninsula. And as we zoom in a little bit more to St. Paul and St. George, you'll notice that edge there is about 25 nautical miles or so north of St. Paul Island. We've got to remember, though, that about 5, maybe 10 nautical miles of that leading edge is mostly strips of generally lower concentration. So this is just kind of the first little wave of ice that's moving south and southeast. Behind that is thicker concentrations of first-year ice. So it takes a little bit longer to get into at least some of those thicker concentrations and also the higher thickness of that ice there. But generally speaking, the leading edge of where the Sea Ice Desk has analyzed that first wave of ice there is around 25 nautical miles, generally north and northeast of St. Paul. Still moving southward about 10 nautical miles a day or so. So we'll see how things turn out here in the next couple days. Here is a look at southeast forecast now for south and southeasterly winds across the inner waterways, 25 to 30 knots, 5 to 6 foot seas there on the inside, 4 foot seas in the Lynn Canal with a southerly flow continuing. South and southeasterly coast, wind coming up the southeastern coast at 25 knots with 9 foot seas in the north and 13 foot seas outside of Dixon Entrance by Saturday. Very little change in any of the areas, still looking at 20 to 25 there on the coast and 15 to 20 on the inside. 15-knot winds in the Lynn Canal, a light wind there from the south with a small sea, and southeasterlies in the Clarence Strait with 4 foot seas there on 20 knots from the south and east for Saturday. Across the south central coastline, you'll notice northerlies still coming down Cook Inlet over the ice north of Callaghan Island, and northerlies south of Kenai and west of the Barrens, 30 knots with a 7 foot sea, a little bit lighter wind there east of the Barrens. Northeasterlies crossing through Prince William Sound and just outside of Resurrection Bay, 20 to 30 knots with a 9 to 10 foot sea, 3 feet inside of Prince William Sound. About the same there, a little more of an easterly shift as we get into Saturday with south and easterly winds coming into Prince William Sound from the outside. And you can see the circulation here, low pressure working westward toward the peninsula. Easterlies outside of Resurrection Bay and Gore Point, 20 knot winds there with a 9 foot sea. Northerlies east of the Barrens and also to the west, about 15 to 20. 10 to 20 coming down the Cook Inlet with 5 foot seas there west of Kenai. Northerlies in Shellicop Strait and westerlies coming off of Kodiak Island at 25 knots with a 10 foot sea. For the Alaska Peninsula, northeasterlies inside of Bristol Bay. East winds also generally light north of Cold Bay with a 5 foot sea all the way out toward Port Hayden. Easterlies from Castle Cape to Sand Point around 20 knots with an 8 foot sea, and southeasterlies a little bit west of that. As you get into Saturday, the flow reverses a south and southwesterly wind on the Pacific side, still looking at an opposing flow there on the Bering Sea coast, 15 to about 20 knots at times with a 3 foot sea north of Cold Bay. For the Aleutians, northerly winds are still in charge for most areas, a 20 to about 35 knot wind from the north in all areas. One exception will be south of Unalaska and Dutch Harbor and Nikolsky, more of a variable flow there and lighter winds at 15 knots. 7 to as high as 14 foot seas on the Pacific side, 10 to 14 foot seas on the Bering Sea coast from Kiska to Attu. Those winds still running around 20 to 30 knots. A little bit of a shift out in the west on Saturday. Northeasterlies around Attu at 20 knots with a 9 foot sea. We get an easterly flow developing north of Unalaska and Nikolsky, about 15 knots with 6 to 8 foot seas there. And northerlies for all of our friends in Adak and Atka, with 35 knot winds there on the Pacific Sea coast with 8 foot seas expected there on Saturday. For the west, a northerly flow coming across St. Lawrence Island, a little bit stronger the further west you go from St. Matthews, still looking at 30 knots there, and 30 knot winds for St. Paul and St. George. Winds should be diminishing starting after midnight tonight, so some of those gusts will improve after midnight tonight. Easterlies across the Kuskokwim Bay and the Delta region with a 20 knot wind. That becomes a little more northeasterly and diminishes somewhat A north and northeasterly wind should continue for northern areas of the Bering, with easterlies for the Pribilofs, 15 knots with a 5-foot sea. That'll likely slow the ice down a little bit as well. East and northeasterly winds across the central Beaufort seacoast, about 15 knots or so, 20 knots coming down the Chukchi coast, 25 knots for Cape Lisburne, and a little bit slower winds there inside and outside of Kotzebue Sound at 20 knots. For Saturday, a little bit more of a northerly shift there at 25 knots. Otherwise, east and northeasterly winds for the Beaufort seacoast going through Saturday. So let's recap the weather that's going on tonight. Rain back for southeastern Alaska with a warmer and wetter flow. Some pockets of snow there across British Columbia, the Chilkoot and White Pass region, and into the Yukon. Otherwise, it's snow showers north and east of Prince William Sound, and probably rain showers on the inside. Diminishing areas of clouds and snow showers for the Susitna Valley. That'll continue to hover around the Alaska Range until early morning. And for areas across the west coast, a better chance for snow and blowing snow, especially around the Pribilofs, where gusts may remain strong at least into midnight or so. Those gusts could hover around 55 miles per hour with sustained winds from the north about 30 to 45 at times. After midnight, we expect that to improve. You'll still see some gusts throughout the overnight hours from the north about 20 to 35 with gusts to 45 there, and that is going to reduce your visibility. From now until early morning hours, probably about another inch of snow on top of what the wind moves around, of course, so a winter weather advisory continues for your area. Low pressure will hover just south of Unalaska and Dutch Harbor at 993 millibars. That's pushing some warmer air up into the southern Bering Sea, and with that, rain and snow showers should be expected. Things will remain fairly clear across south central, the Matanuska, Susitna, and the Cook Inlet region. Snow showers will continue across the lower and middle Yukon valleys, maybe an inch of snow from tonight into tomorrow for areas around Unalakleet and points northward. Rain continues for southeast going into Saturday, more of the same for you, and sloppier weather returns to south central and parts of Kodiak Island. Snow showers continue in the west and cold up north. Thanks for watching. See you again.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.